If you've been here with us for the last few weeks and you've been with us during this whole series talking about gifting or giving in 2 Corinthians, can I just say thanks for being here? There's people who would have heard a few weeks ago we're doing a 6 to 8 week series on gifting, and they would have been like, well, Thanksgiving, Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, we'll see you in January. Because they didn't want to sit through 6 to 8 weeks talking about giving in Corinthians. So if you're here and you're willing to bring that area of your life under what God wants you to do, then thanks for being here. Thanks for being willing not to just take the stuff that we all want to know about in the Bible, but being willing to sit and say, how should I give? How should the Bible instruct me to do these things, and how can I transform this area of my life to do that? So just thank you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for being faithful in this part of your life. So we are in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We're finishing up chapter 8 this week. And so if you haven't been with us, there's 2 chapters in 2 Corinthians that Paul spends a whole lot of time talking with the Corinthians about their gift, this giving that they agreed to give to the Judean Christians in Jerusalem. And for these 2 chapters, how I've been kind of breaking it up is just principles for giving. So we've been going week by week and just looking at how does Paul instruct the Corinthian church to give, and then trying to come up with some principles for maybe what giving should look like in our own lives from that. The first week we talked, Paul gave the example of the Macedonian church, and he said this: they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us. So we talked about the first principle of giving is just to say to God, what is it that you would have me give? And whether I understand it, whether it makes sense to me, whether I get it or not, God, you asked me to do it, so I'm just going to do it. And that was the first principle. Second principle we talked about was this example that Paul gives of Jesus Christ. He basically says he gave everything for you. And so he became the foundation, the example for our giving. The question, why give it all? You give because you were given everything in Christ. And then last week we talked about giving according to your means. Paul says you shouldn't give so that you are burdened and other people have an abundance, but you should give out of fairness, give according to your means. Here's what that kind of means. It kind of means opening your mind to the plan of God. Seeing that sometimes God gives you and me a little extra, and he gives some other people a little less. And our job is to listen to God, open our eyes, see his plan, watch him provide for other people through you and me, or watch God provide for us through other people. He knew that the Judean Christians were going to be in famine long before they were going to be there, and he provided for the Gentile churches what they needed to support the Jerusalem Christians long before they were ever in poverty. But it's about us getting on board with that, seeing what God sees. This week is for the practical people. This week is for the people who are like, okay, I kind of get the giving thing. In the beginning of chapter 9, we're going to talk about reaping and sowing and all that stuff. And I kind of get all that stuff, but I don't know these people that I'm giving my money to, and I don't know what they do, and I don't know who they are, and so I'm just not comfortable with that. This is for the practical people. This is for the people who are not just worried about whether or not I should follow God, not just worried about what kind of heart I should give with. These are the people who are going, I want details. I want a plan. I want to know who this money is going to go to, and I want to know whose hands it's going to move to, and I want to know, are they honest people? And this is for the person who's asking legitimate, logical questions about giving. Paul's going to talk about this guy named Titus and 2 other guys who are the ones who are supposed to go to the Corinthian church, pick up the donation, and take it to Jerusalem. Paul's going to reassure them that these people have been vetted, they're trustworthy, they're approved, if you will, people. So this week is going to be a whole lot of practical. Here's what it's not about this week. This is not really talking about this is not talking about the people who are just like, oh, I saw the homeless guy on the street, so I'm going to give him $50 or whatever. This is the guy who's like, no, I need to know, where is this money going? How is it going to get there? And I need to make sure that what I give is protected. So if you're sitting there and you think that giving to the church or giving to a parachurch organization or giving to anybody just has to be a spontaneous trust God and don't do any research and don't think about it at all, just give it away, and it's not. It doesn't have to be that. Paul goes to great length to make sure that the people who are giving of what they've earned know that what they give is going to be secure. And you and I have the ability to do the same. In fact, I think we should be doing the same, especially if we're choosing to give in certain areas. Here's what we're also not talking about. We're also not talking about who receives my gift. Okay, so there's a million ways that if you give to a parachurch organization or you give to a church, there's a million ways that the money can be spent. We're not talking about that. We're talking about how does the company, how does the organization handle it when they get it. So we can spend days arguing about where should the money go, but we're not going to do that because we're just talking about, is it secure when I give it? Does what I give actually get used for what I gave it for? We're not talking about who receives it. We're talking about who's approved to manage it. So let's jump in. Whole section here in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. Well, starting in verse 16. Paul says this, "But thanks be to God who put into the heart of Titus the same earnest care I have for you. For he not only accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he is going to you of his own accord." So, real basic here. Titus is one of the approved people because he has earnestness for the cause. So, this may seem really basic. It may seem like, well, duh, I wouldn't give to an organization like that. But if the people in the organization or the people in the church are like, I'm not so sure this is the best place you should be giving your money, okay, you don't want to give your money to that place. Like, the whole point of what he's saying is like, Titus believes in this cause. Okay, like he's on board with what we're doing. He believes in it too. So it's maybe a really obvious, maybe a really logical conclusion, but Paul's just making it up front. Titus is not like reluctantly going to them saying, yeah, I guess I can go do that, even though I'm not really for this whole Gentile church supporting the Jewish church thing. I don't know if I want to do that. He's on board. He wants them to do this. He's encouraged by it. First kind of part of it is the people you should be giving to, they should believe in the organization that they're for. Okay. The second thing you should notice is that Titus is doing it of his own accord. There's a volunteer involved. So what's going to happen is you're going to see as this passage goes on, there's actually 3 guys that get sent to collect this offering from the Corinthian church and take it to Jerusalem. There's a volunteer. There's one guy from the Jerusalem churches, and there's one guy from Paul's side. So Paul's the one making the appeal. He's telling them, you should get in on this. You should give to them. You should help them. But you see the accountability. One guy who does it on his own. One guy from the Jerusalem church making sure it gets to Jerusalem. And one guy from the Corinthian church side making sure that what they give actually gets to Jerusalem. There's accountability on both sides and one dude in the middle saying, I'll do it. I'll be kind of the central mediator, neutral party. That's Titus. Paul did ask him to go. It says he not only accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he is going to you of his own accord. So, one earnest volunteer. Verse 18 is the second person they're sending. With him we are sending the brother who is famous among all the churches for his preaching of the gospel. Some of you are thinking, well, that's not much of a qualification. Like, just because you can preach the gospel well doesn't mean you can manage finances or you're an honest guy just because you know a few things about the Bible. Okay, I think that's more of a title. Notice he doesn't say his name. Notice he just says, the brother who can preach well. Probably the Corinthian church knew who this guy was. Probably they When he said, oh, remember the guy who can preach really well? They were probably like, oh yeah, we know that guy. It's probably more of a title more than it is a qualification. So he's not saying that he's qualified to carry your gift because he's a good preacher. I think it's just using it as identification. It's the preacher guy. Here's how he is qualified. Verse 19 says, and not only that, but he has been appointed by the churches, that is, the ones in Jerusalem, the same ones that sent Paul out and Barnabas out and Timothy out. Not only that, but he has been appointed by the churches to travel with us as we carry out this act of grace that is being ministered by us for the glory of the Lord himself to show our good will. This is the guy appointed from Jerusalem. This is the guy on the Jerusalem side going, I'm going to go with them. The Jerusalem people said, yes, Paul, go out, evangelize to the Gentile churches, mention this need that we have to them. If they want to support us, great. And we'll send somebody with you in case they happen to say, yes, we want to support you. He'll be there, and he can be our representative. He's sent by the Jerusalem church. So here's one of the things you can take away from that choice. This is a guy who's appointed by multiple churches, multiple communities. Which means this guy who's approved, who's handling the money, is not just like this little clique over here who happens to want some cash, so like they're going to send somebody and make sure it all happens. No, this is multiple churches in Judea, all saying, that guy's an honest guy, send him. He'll represent all of us well. So if you're looking to evaluate, like, who gets to move my money from here to here, a person who is approved by multiple communities, that's probably the person you want to pick. That's what you want to be looking for, not just the one who's appointed by one person and say, oh, that's my right-hand man. He's going to do the job really well. No, a group of people all agreeing this person's honest, this person's truthful, this person's not going to do us any harm or disservice. That's the guy from Jerusalem. Verse 20 says this, we take this course so that no one should blame us about the gracious gift that is being administered by us. Okay, so Paul's just saying, look, we're going to great lengths here so that nobody blames us. Here's the next principle for this week. This is what you should be looking for if you're trying to give to an organization, you're trying to give to a church, you want to know, is it going to be managed well? Here's what you should look for. It's verse 21. Paul says this, for we aim at what is honorable, not only in the Lord's sight, but also in the sight of man. So that's principle number 4. If you're looking to give somewhere, God has told you give, and you're doing some research and you're trying to figure out, is this a legitimate, approved people? You want to look for if they're aiming to be pleasing to God and to men. If their aim is to be honorable in the sight of the Lord. Here's the difference. You can be honorable if Paul just sent one guy. So like Paul says, there's some money that needs to get picked up. It needs to be taken to Jerusalem. And Paul just sends one guy. And the one guy goes there and he picks it up and nothing happens to it. And he takes it to Jerusalem and he gives it to him. He's honorable before God, right? But everybody else has questions. Did all the money make it there? I mean, we can't just pick up a phone and call. Like, there's thousands of miles between these places, and we need to make sure that what they gave actually made it. And so the Jerusalem church has questions because they're looking at the gift going, well, this is really generous. But is it all of it? Well, we don't know because there's only one guy. And the same thing about the churches in Macedonia and Achaia. They're giving their gift and they're saying, well, hope it makes it. Could you give us a receipt? Could you like go there and then write up a receipt and then like bring it back? And the one guy that they send is probably like, no, I'm not doing that. Okay, so there's a difference between, he could be that one guy could be honorable in the sight of God. Okay, but if they're not going to additional lengths to be honorable in the sight of men, maybe that's a problem. It's not always a problem, but maybe it's a problem. We should be looking for people who are honorable in the sight of God and in the sight of men.
The last person that gets sent, verse 22. And with them we are sending our brother, whom we have often tested. This is Paul's side. This is the side that the Corinthian church is going to trust. We are sending our brother, whom we have often tested and found earnest in many matters, but who is now more earnest than ever because of his great confidence in you. So the last person that's being sent, qualification for him, testing. Okay, this is not a guy who just showed up and said, I'll take the money. Okay, he just didn't show up to Paul and say, a really large gift that's going from one church to the next. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure I'm bigger than those other two guys you're sending, so it should be good, right? Okay, this guy's been tested. We know that this guy's an honest guy. One earnest volunteer. One guy approved by multiple communities. A group of people, not just one. And one guy who's been tested and tried. And the reflection of his actions shows that he's an honest guy. This is the group that Paul sends to collect this donation. And he goes to great lengths to assure the Corinthian church that what they give will be protected. I don't think that any of us who choose to give, even if God's told us to give, shouldn't be sure that what we give is protected. And it's okay for you to go through the motions to know, is what I give going to be protected? Paul goes to great lengths to explain it is going to be protected to the Corinthian church. I think you and I can expect the same. Maybe, we can expect, I think, the same. Last couple verses here. As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker for your benefit. He's just repeating himself. He's going to reassure them again. And as for our brothers, they are messengers of the churches for the glory of Christ. So give proof before the churches of your love and of your boasting and of our boasting about you to these men. It's the same encouragement that Paul's been giving them. Give proof. You promised that you would give. You said you would give. Now give proof. Show these men that we boasted of you and it was not in vain. Don't let them get there and you say, oh, we forgot, or we changed our mind. You said you would do it, so do it. The principle for evaluating practically, is this place a place that I should be giving what God's asked me to give to? Are they approved people who aim to be honorable in the sight of God and in the sight of man? I got to be honest with you. Majority of the time I spent looking at this, I thought to myself, well, that ain't got nothing to do with us. I mean, this is Titus and the Corinthian church, and they carried this money, and it's already been carried a long time ago, and these guys, we don't know them, and it's helpful to look and think, well, who were these people, and how were they approved? But to be completely honest, when I was looking through it, the only thing that was running in the back of my mind was, what does our church do? Does our church follow these guidelines? Do we fit in this box of how to handle money? I mean, where does it go? And so, contrary to maybe some advice I have been given, I started asking a bunch of questions because I thought to myself, to be honest, how am I supposed to work in a place where I can't be confident? And so I went to Roger. I went to the head, not deacon, usher downstairs, who handles most of it. I went to a finance committee member and said, I've sat in deacon meetings before and I've seen numbers, but to be honest, I don't whip out my calculator and go, yep, it all lines up, good. Mostly because it would take me ages to do that because it's not what I'm trained in. So we have a finance committee member in our service. I just texted that person and said, hey, do all the numbers line up? She assured me, to the best of her knowledge, they do. I just went to Roger and said, how does the money transfer work?
I mean, like, because I got to be honest, I don't have a clue. I mean, I know some money goes into the box back there. I know they pass the plates downstairs, but what happens to it after that? Like, and who touches it, and how does it move, and where does it go, and how does it get to the bank account, and then who pays the bills? And because I've only been here 2 years, and I don't know any of that stuff. And I started to realize more and more about, like, I just don't know. And I think a lot of Christians are that way. I think they just expect, they hope, they pray that their church manages things well. Okay, we came from a church that didn't. We came from a church before this that my wife was on staff, and she had to turn her boss in for stealing money from the church that she found out inadvertently. Okay, and that had been happening on a rotating basis about every 5 years. So when I sat down with this passage, I said to myself, okay, I have to know because we can't do that again. We can't be a part of that again. So I just started asking a whole bunch of questions. Here's some things from the document that Roger sent me that I confirmed with the lead usher that these things actually take place. Here's some things from the document that he sent me that maybe I thought were helpful to know. So money that's given to FBC goes in the box. Somebody who's not a pastor or a staff person takes the money out of the box or the money out of the plates downstairs, and it goes directly into a safe. I don't touch that. Doug's doesn't touch that. None of our pastors downstairs touch any of that. Volunteers only. It goes from there into a safe, of which only 3 people in the church know the combination to that safe. One's a staff member, one's on the finance committee, one's a volunteer. That's it. Those 3 people it gets locked up. Later on in the day, okay, I'm not giving you names and I'm not giving you times, okay, for safety. Okay. Later on in the day, it gets counted and recorded. Put into a deposit slip. And then later on in the day, 2 deacons, it gets taken from the safe to be counted with 2 deacons and the lead usher. Okay, that's 3 guys. 2 deacons and the lead usher. If a deacon can't make it, they replace themselves with another deacon. Not Joe Schmo, best friend. Okay, gets counted, gets recorded, gets put into a deposit envelope. Goes back in the safe until it's taken to the bank. It's taken to the bank by 2 people, minimum, sometimes 3. It's either taken by 2 deacons or it's taken by an usher and a deacon. Okay, at every point, there's never a transfer of hands with just one person involved. The finance committee that we have, 9 people. 4 out of the 9 are women. I thought that was cool. No pastors, no staff members have the authority to sign checks at FBC. There's 4 people on the account that can sign checks, that can pay bills, to pull money out. 4 people, all volunteers. Okay. I don't know if you want more than that. There's a whole list of stuff. I just pulled out the things that I thought were cool because I needed to know. I really wanted to stand up here and reassure you that what you give to FBC is protected. But I got to be honest, selfishly, I just want to know for me. Because we tithe and we give offering, and I needed to know that the money that we work hard for goes to the right places where we designate it. Approved people, that's the goal. The aim is to be honorable in the sight of God and in the sight of men. If you want more details, more information, I'm sure Roger would give it to you. I didn't even have to ask twice. He sent me an email back in like 30 minutes. He's pretty good about that. Here's what we do. I forwarded him the emails that I sent to the lead usher and said, This is what I've been talking to him about. Yeah, that's how it works. Just some reassuring about what happens here at FBC. But anywhere you go and give, you're looking for volunteers. You're looking for people representing both parties, if there's both parties involved. You're looking for earnestness towards what they're actually collecting money for. You're looking for aiming to be honorable before man and before God. This week, like I said, is a whole lot of practical. It's a whole lot of what ifs. It's a whole lot of somebody sitting in the audience going, you know what, I just need more answers than just God told me to, so I'm just going to give it. I need a little more practicality than that. That's what this is for. Okay, but I talk all the time about life being balanced. And the practical is a whole lot of the balance, but as we talk about so much practical in living out the Christian life, specifically this stuff about giving, the balance to that is knowledge. Okay, the balance to practical day-to-day working it out is knowledge, philosophy. What do we know? So as we come to the communion table, what we know is that Jesus Christ is real. We know that he came satisfying this hope that people had. And we know that he is the source of our hope going forward. Many people walk around and they ask, what does God want from me? I mean, what does he really want from me? Like, does he just want me to follow this book of rules, or does he just want me to believe in him and I can live however I want? What does he actually want? And some people, they live as Christians for a really, really long time, and they never really answer that question. What I should have done was mark Titus in my Bible. Does anybody know where Titus is in the New Testament? It's like this teeny tiny little book that nobody can ever find. Oh, it's at the end of Paul's letters. Sorry. Jeez. I read to you these verses at the beginning. For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation for all people, training us to renounce ungodliness and worldly passions and live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age, waiting for our blessed hope, the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. And that's where I stopped reading. Listen to the next verse. Who gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. Here's God's part. Gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify himself for himself a people. That's God's part. You think you can redeem yourself from lawlessness? You think you can purify yourself? You'll spend your whole life trying and you'll never make it. You can't be good enough. Because it was only one sin in the garden that separated all of humanity. Here's our part, though, at the very end. A people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. That's your part. You want to know, what do I do? How do I act? What do I say? Zealous for good works. Renouncing godliness and worldly passions, live self-controlled, upright, godly lives in the present age. You can do a whole lot of stuff under that banner, but you do whatever you do with self-control, uprightness, and godliness, you'll be on the right track. As you come forward for communion this morning, we're looking forward, we're holding out hope for the return of a Savior. Some of us are clinging to that more than others in this season. Hope that the end of life is not the end of everything. Hope that we get to see loved ones again. Hope that people who never had an interest in Jesus before could someday maybe. Just holding on to hope. As you come forward, this is the body of Christ broken for you. This is the blood of Christ shed for you. Hold on to the hope that comes along with Jesus. Be zealous for good works. Pray with me. Take a moment. You can come up whenever you're ready. We'll play one more song. Father in heaven, thanks for the practical and for the knowledge. Thanks for the spiritual and for the understanding. God, there's a whole lot to life, not just living and money, and also not just knowledge and endlessly arguing about philosophical things that never make it into our daily lives. God, would you teach us to be balanced? To practically manage the gifts that we give well, to not be flippant with the money that you've given us, to be reassured by the places that you've asked us to give that they go towards your kingdom and the building up of your people. God, you gave so much to us. Would you teach us how to give abundantly and well, according to these principles that Paul gave to the Corinthian church so many years ago? Would you help us to reflect these things? And would you fill us with the hope of your Son?